Hey, good morning and welcome to today's webinar, What are my options to move my accounting software to the cloud? I'm Sarah Novak, Marketing Manager at LBMC Technology Solutions, and just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. All the lines have been muted, and if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know using the chat panel. We'll be taking questions throughout today's webinar, so please submit them at any time and we'll make sure and get to them at the end. This webinar will be recorded and we'll be sending that out afterwards. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Brian Campbell. Brian is a digital transformation specialist here at LBMC Technology Solutions, and he's been working with ERP systems for over 30 years. So thank you again for joining us, and Brian, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We look forward to continuing conversations with you as you're having some interest in moving your system from your on-base premise solutions into the cloud. Again, I'm Brian Campbell, account executive here at LBMC Technology Solutions. Today, you're also going to hear from Brian Burke, one of our senior business systems consultants on the Dynamics 365 Business Central and Dynamics GP team, as well as Glenn Sharp, who's our manager of our sales Intact sales support team. Both Brian and Glenn will be taking you through actual product demonstrations of both Business Central and Sage Intacct. So let's talk a little bit about cloud accounting. Is it right for you and your company? Today, most of you, I believe, are using Dynamics GP, which is traditionally an on-premise installed system. You put software installed onto physical servers. Some of you may also have Dynamics CRM, which is also, again, started out traditionally as an on-premise solution. A number of years ago, Microsoft actually moved Dynamics CRM into the cloud and gave you both a cloud or an on-premise option. But where has Microsoft really gone with cloud computing as it related to the ERP side? Well, today, Microsoft offers really two different ERP solutions in the cloud. One we won't talk about today, which is called Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. But the other one where most of our Dynamics GP clients look to transition to is the Dynamics 365 Business Central. Business Central is a true cloud ERP. That means you have no local footprint. You have no local installation, no upgrades. We'll talk a little bit deeper about that. Same with Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct has been around for over 15 years. It's a true cloud ERP solution. Sage Intacct has always been a cloud solution, never an on-premise solution. So when you're looking at migrating from an on-premise, we've got two options for you, which we think are really great options to consider. And we'll be showing you both of those solutions here. But the big question that many of you will have is am I going to be forced to move away from Dynamics GP? Well, the good news is Microsoft will continue to enhance Dynamics GP for the foreseeable future. We don't necessarily have a date as to when Microsoft will make you transition from GP to another cloud-based solution. Microsoft has continued to enhance the product and will continue to enhance it in the on-base solution, local on your servers. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of cloud accounting. Obviously, when you're moving everything into cloud, as most of you are using on cloud-based solutions, similar to things like Office 365, mobile access is really important. So you can take your laptop, your tablets, your phones, anywhere you want and still have access to the information. Both Business Central and Sage offer you that mobile access. There's automatic backups. Your systems are automatically backed up. The vendors are taking care of all of that. You don't have to take care of that anymore. No more upgrades. Traditionally, if you're on Dynamics GP and a new version comes out, we need to back up your system. We need to install the new version of software, migrate your data over, put on any service packs, and then train you on the new features. That goes away. There's no more traditional upgrades because the vendors, Microsoft and Sage, are both doing that for you behind the scenes. One day you're using those products with one feature set, the next day you're using the new feature sets added. There's no downtime for you. There's no installation. Software as a service environments basically offer you a situation where all you need is an internet access and a browser, and you get access to these systems. So you have much safer and better controls. You don't have to worry about, do I have the right security on my servers, on my desktops? Microsoft and Sage both take care of all of that. There's no annual maintenance. So many of the fees that you're used to paying before you bought the software and then you paid annual maintenance. Those go away in a traditional SaaS environment. You've got one payment, monthly payment that you are using to basically rent the systems. So there's less paper. You don't need to have, traditionally the annual maintenance. You're just paying usually through a credit card to get access to these systems. Some additional benefits, and we're going to talk about the first one a little bit more in depth, but operating expense versus capital expense. So moving from traditional on-premise servers where you have to buy the hardware, buy the infrastructure, pay for the software, pay for the service, pay for the additional software that's needed to provide security, really goes away. And you move more to an operational expense where you're paying a monthly fee. You don't need to buy you don't have the upfront capital expense for those servers or those software. That's all bundled in to a monthly cost. Again, you're outsourcing utilities, management, security, and liability. Microsoft and Sage are taking care of that. And all of that effort, time, and cost to do that is just bundled into your monthly fees for both Business Central and Sage Intacct. I think as I talked about earlier, there's no server upgrades because you don't have any infrastructure that's needed. IT support is minimal because you don't need to worry about patching desktops, patching servers, installing service packs for those software. That all goes away. Additional things, database licenses for SQL Server, which sit behind Dynamics GP today, that's all bundled into your licensing fees for Business Central and for Sage Intacct. And again, antivirus software updates and backups, all taken care of. So what are some of the risks of cloud accounting? Because there are risks involved. Well, your risk would be, would the vendors go away? Now, looking traditionally, Microsoft as one vendor and Sage as the other vendor, those companies have been around for decades. They're not likely to go away. Probably the biggest concern that most people actually have and ask about is, well, what happens if I lose my internet access? Then yes, you do have interruption in service and access to your system. However, most people have redundant internet access, internet companies, as well as Microsoft and Sage have options for moving, if say a data center went down, moving your systems to another data center. So it's very minimal, but it is certainly a risk. Security breach. I would argue that both Microsoft and Sage have greater security than what you will probably ever have in your local servers, your local infrastructure. But that is a possibility. Upgrades. So one of the things that you'll notice when you move to a cloud solution is, like I said, one day you have one feature set of the software, the next day you have the next feature set. So there is a point in time when those vendors do upgrade your system. And some of you might have customization, some of you might have third-party solutions that are add-ins to these software, and maybe you're not ready for that. The good news is you can actually delay those upgrades. Now, you do have to know that at some point in time, you have to take the upgrades no matter what. So while you can delay when those new feature sets are added, at some point you have to. So again, ISV options are something we need to be concerned about. Some of you, especially at Dynamics GP, you might have third-party solutions. What happens to those third parties? Have they made the move to the new systems? Many of the Dynamics GP third-party vendors have already made the transition from their solutions from Dynamics GP over to Business Central. Sage Intacct has been out for a long time. Sage actually has a lot of the functionality that many of our Dynamics GP third-party solutions have, so that's already built into the product. And the same with Business Central, but there may be third parties that you don't have. That is a concern. Again, systems outages, very rare. It does happen, but it's part of the service level agreement. So again, making sure that that is defined in the service level agreements with each of those vendors. Again, what about disaster recovery? So Microsoft and both Sage, in their service level agreements, will talk about disaster recovery. Who owns the data? At the end of the day, you own the data. As long as you continue to pay your monthly subscription fees for both Business Central or Sage Intacct, the data will sit out there. If you choose you want to move to another system, or you decide that we just don't want to continue with these products or move to a different product, you have the option to stop the service. Those vendors will back up the data and send you that data. So you own the data, but there is a process of moving the data from their SaaS environments to a backup that you take. And again, renting. SaaS, well, again, upfront fees are down because you're not paying capital expenditures. You do have a monthly rental fee. And then again, database access. So that is one thing that's a little bit different. For those of you who have traditional on-premise Dynamics GP on-premise, you have full control and access to what we do in the database. You do, and LBMC does as well. In a SaaS model, because in many cases you're in a multi-tenanted environment, you have limited access to the database. So we have to use APIs, tools to get access to the data. The good news is those APIs and those tools are very robust and they allow us easily to get to the data to do whatever you really want to do. So I talked a little bit earlier about capital expenditures, moving it into an operational expense. So again, upfront license fees go away when you move to a cloud. You pay for what you use for, and you pay for when you use it. So your annual maintenance fee that you have with Dynamics GP is just bundled now into the monthly fees. Again, you bear the risk of all IT infrastructure costs, systems down, security. In a cloud model, the vendor accepts that problem. They take on all the risk, and again, part of your monthly fees. Traditionally with Dynamics GP, you see sometimes a semi-annual service pack release some additional functionality, but generally major releases come out at between 18 and 24 months. Well, both Business Central and Sage Intacct, they can innovate monthly by adding that functionality in, because again, there is no process for you to go through and upgrade. So you're going to get newer software, stay current continually by being in a cloud environment. Again, you bear all the risk for upgrades. Microsoft, Sage, they handle both of that. Again, the whole ship and forget, they send the software out to you, we send you the software, we forget about it. The vendors are accountable for that. So looking to move from Dynamics GP to Business Central, Microsoft offers a plan for discounts. To take your GP to move it to Business Central, Microsoft provides a 40% discount off of your monthly fees for Business Central. It is a new product, so recognize that it really is a new implementation. We're moving from one ERP system to another. It's completely different. So we go through the same process that we do. If you have questions about that, we can certainly talk through what the implementation process looks like. But we do include training. So there is training available. Many of you are on Customer Source, which is Microsoft's self-support site. There is training videos for Business Central out there that you can get. Reports, we do need to rework reports. So we're building reports in Dynamics GP. We're building them now new into Business Central. And again, as I talked about earlier, you need to watch out for the ISV products. If you have third-party products, we want to make sure that either the functionality exists inside of Business Central or there's a third party that provides that functionality in Business Central. So again, as we go through this process with you looking to evaluate a move to Business Central, talk to your account executive or your strategic account manager about those third-party solutions. Migration tools. One of the nice things is Microsoft provides the migration tools to allow us to take the data. Primarily, we're looking at the master records, so chart of accounts, customers, vendors, inventory, as well as the open transactions. So open payables, vendors, payables, receivables, inventory transactions. What we don't generally bring over is sales history, purchase history. And again, updates with GP are in April and October, so timing might be something. So what happens if you want to move from GP to Sage Intacct? So again, it's a new product, it's a new implementation. We can talk about that. Annual subscriptions, monthly payments. Again, you're going to pay for an annual subscription. I'm going to be an upfront annual subscription. But again, you move from a purchase with a maintenance license to a rental. So what's the cost of Sage Intacct versus Business Central? We can help you evaluate both those solutions. Quarterly updates. Sage does a great job of providing quarterly updates. Again, new features, new functionality in the product that you don't have to pay additional extra cost for or take the time to upgrade. It's just bundled in. And again, there are native migration tools inside of Sage Intacct that allow us to move GP to Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct is the number one endorsed solution by the AICPA. Again, product very mature. It's been around for a long time. But as we had with Business Central, we need to watch for third-party solutions. Make sure the functionality that we have within GP exists either within the native Sage Intacct product or within third-party solutions that are added onto it. Where Sage Intacct is really strong for many of you is in things like revenue recognition, not-for-profit, financial services, professional services, healthcare, core accounting. We'll talk a little bit about LBMC here, but LBMC has a strong history with Sage Intacct, over 350 implementations of Sage Intacct. We've done a number of GP transitions to Sage Intacct as well. So how can we help you out? We can help you evaluate these solutions, do a return on investment and a total cost of ownership from moving from your current GP hosted on-premise to cloud solutions, whether it's Business Central or Sage Intacct. We'll review with you what's the best solution. How do we get you from where you are today and to a cloud solution? We'll map that out with you, talk about how we will provide to you continued support. We'll support you regardless of whether you make the move to cloud today or in the future. We've got a very strong team. You're going to be hearing from Brian Burke, who's one of our GP consultants, who's also on our Business Central team. We'll continue to support that product even longer than Microsoft will. And we'll help you in that process of converting your annual maintenance over to the monthly cost. And we'll show you what that looks like. So for many of you, you might be new to LBMC and don't know a lot about us. Again, LBMC Technology Solutions, we've been around since 1996, so 25 years. We're part of LBMC, which is a top 50 accounting provider in the United States here. We've got customers in almost, and I think this number might even have changed, customers in 38 states. We have staff all over the country, from West Coast to East Coast, North to South. Again, our vision is to empower you, our clients, and make sure that we provide to you the best solutions, streamline your processes, and help you improve your business productivity and drive those financial results. And we believe that cloud computing can help you in that. There's really three pillars of our organizations. One we're going to primarily talk about today is our business software and consulting. So our ERP, our CRM side, we didn't talk about that, but we are partners for both Dynamics CRM as well as Salesforce. The middle pillar is our IT services. So things around helping you manage your infrastructure on site. So managed services, cybersecurity assessment, risk assessment. We can help you. For many of our clients, we are their IT department. For some of our clients, we just provide complementary services. We can provide to you whatever you want to help you, again, with the most robust IT solutions in the market. We also do software development integration. As we're going to talk about, and many of you already have today, you've had customizations to your systems, or you've integrated your ERP, your Dynamics GP to other systems. We've got a team that's all that they do. They do develop for the software, and they integrate our solutions, both Business Central and Sage Intacct, with other business systems that you have. Again, award-winning. We are considered by both Sage Intacct and Microsoft as one of their top partners nationally and globally. Bob Scott, for many of you may not be aware of him, does an annual assessment of the top value-added resellers in the United States. We're one of the top, and we have been for many years, again, counting today. So one solution we have not talked about, which I wanted to quickly highlight at the very bottom, is Onbase. Onbase is an enterprise content management system. For lack of a better term, think of SharePoint on steroids. If many of you looking for both the content management side, but Onbase also does a lot of things around workflow and business automation. So AP automation is one area where many of our clients look to enhance their systems. Onbase can actually work with both Sage Intacct and Business Central to create an automated workflow enhancement of taking vendor invoices and bringing them in automatically into those systems. If you have some interest in Onbase, again, raise your hand, let us know, and we'll get somebody in contact with you to talk about Onbase. Again, the pillar of companies, a couple that I might highlight here beyond what we've talked about here. First of all, LBMC, our data insights group, if you've got needs for data insights, business intelligence, that group, that's all that they work with. Again, our technology solutions, as well as we provide sources with HR and recruiting services, payroll. For many of our companies that are using services like ADP or Paychecks, LBMC offers that services as well. So if you're interested in knowing more about our payroll services, again, raise your hand and let us know. As I mentioned earlier, where are we located? We're everywhere in the United States, East Coast to West, North to South. These are some of the industries where we've got a lot of expertise in. Many of you fall into these industries, but we also have expertise in industries outside of this. Slide first here. So again, if you want to learn more about LBMC, this is the place to go. Here's our website. Come to us to learn more about webinars that we have. We have monthly, quarterly webinars that might be of interest to you. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And again, if there's any questions, please drop those in the chat and we'll be glad to answer those either today or later on. So with that, I'm going to transition over to the demonstrations. I believe Brian Burke is first up. So I will stop sharing my screen here. I think I have. And Brian, I think it's up to you.
I think we're good now. Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us this morning to take a look at Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. It's a long name, so I'm going to refer to that as BC today. So the first thing I wanted to do was kind of give you an overall look and feel about how the software is structured and where things are and how you find things. And we'll look at the chart of accounts, and then we'll talk about dimensions for a bit. And then also talk about the tight integration that Business Central has with the other Microsoft products, such as Outlook and Excel. And then we'll talk at the end a little bit about reporting. So first of all, when you come into Business Central, you know, again, it's a cloud-based application, so it works with any browser. You'll notice that there are a lot of different colors on this screen. All of them have meaning. The text that is in sort of the teal color, those are all hyperlinks to other places within the application. So if I wanted to get to the chart of accounts, you know, I have a hyperlink, I can click there. If I wanted to get to fixed assets, I can click there, and so forth. So you can create and arrange those hyperlinks to your, you know, at your discretion, so that they're more easily laid out and you can find things, you know, basically at your fingertips. Moving down the page, you can see that there are various sections where you have insights into the business, you know, what's going on within the application. There is a section here on activities. So based upon your role and permissions, you would be able to see, you know, quick statistics about values or totals or summaries of different areas within the system. The colors in this area have meaning. So anything that's green is good. Something that's trending yellow needs to be watched. This little bar here is in yellow. This one is green. And you can also see that there are some bars here that are in red. So that is telling you that action needs to be taken in that area. Those colors and thresholds are configurable to your discretion. So you know, you may be monitoring an amount differently than someone else might be monitoring that same amount, and you may reflect yours in a different color than they would. Towards the bottom, there are other sections, you know, within the home page that show different areas and different links to data that you can get to. At the bottom, there is an insight section where you can show charts and graphs related to certain statistics or activity that you may want to monitor. There's a business performance section on the left side of the screen. Also, if you're using Power BI, which is another tightly integrated application, and you have reports developed in Power BI, you can show those on your home page, your role center within Business Central. At the very bottom of the page here, you can have an area called Favorite Accounts, where if there are certain general ledger accounts that you want to monitor, you can have those displayed. And again, those are hyperlinks. So if you wanted to drill into any of those accounts and look at the detail behind those balances, you could do so just by clicking on those links. So scrolling back to the top, talk about chart of accounts for just a minute and how that's different from GP. In my test system here, I have a chart of accounts that has a 5-digit segment in it. In GP, you know, we're used to having a multi-segmented account number where I might have a main or natural account, and then I might have a department, a location, a facility, some other identified area that is an account segment. So the difference being in Business Central that my main or natural account is my account number in Business Central. So that would be what you would see within your chart of accounts. And again, then you have the ability to drill down on any of those balances. One other feature that's optional within Business Central, it's not required, is that you can see that there are labels within the chart where I've got balance sheet, assets, total current assets, et cetera. There's a feature that allows you to summarize accounts within your chart so that you can have kind of a quick financial statement look at your chart of accounts at any given time. Again, that's not required, but it is an option. So talking about dimensions for a minute, I'm going to use a feature here called, I call it the global search within Business Central. Microsoft calls it Tell Me. But if I wanted to look at dimensions, I can begin to type in some of that word, and then I can select dimensions here. And you can see that I have a bunch of dimensions set up. So consider a dimension like an account segment, where instead of having a long account segment, you could have a dimension that you would then tag onto a transaction. So within Business Central, you can have an unlimited number of dimensions configured. And then within each of those dimensions, you can also have dimension values. And those dimension values are unlimited as well. So depending upon what information you want to track or tag onto a transaction, you would set those up within Business Central as a dimension. And then as you enter a transaction, you would select the appropriate dimension and the dimension value. There is also provisions for defaulting certain dimensions within either the chart of accounts or customers, vendors, items, and so forth, so that you don't necessarily have to select the dimensions all the time. You can default them. So just going back to the Role Center here for a minute, I wanted to talk a bit about sort of the native reporting tools that might be similar to SmartList and some of those things that we're used to in GP. So I'm going to jump over here really quickly to my, my vendor list. So within Business Central, you have basically what are list pages where you can look at the data. You can export it to Excel quickly. Most areas within Business Central that are list views, you can open that list in Excel and then do Excel things to it. If you wanted to build graphs or charts or that kind of thing. There's also a feature called Edit in Excel, where let's say that maybe I wanted to update all of the phone numbers for my vendors. I could choose this Edit in Excel option, and that would export this list page out to Excel and form a dynamic link with the application between Excel and Business Central. I could then edit the phone numbers in Excel, publish that list back to Business Central, and it would update all of the phone numbers here for me. Again, that's a permission-based feature. If you don't have, obviously, permission to do that, not everyone could just do it, but it's a very convenient way that you can edit data within the application. I wanted to show a bit here about SmartList, so I'm going to go to my General Ledger entries list. So what I have here is a list of every entry that is within Business Central right now. You can see that I've got data going back a few years, but you can create sort of a smart list view within BC. And I've got a couple here, one set up as payments, one set up for data of May of 2020. But I can go ahead and click on those. And these are basically, saved as favorites that you would have in SmartList in GP. So, again, here's one that's all the payments that are showing up in my general ledger. Here's all my activity from May of 2020. So again, these are creatable by any user. You can save them as a favorite, and then you can come back at any time and use those. So also wanted to talk a bit about how do I sort and filter and find things. So within BC, each of these column headers has the ability to sort, filter the data within it. So just by clicking on the header itself, it's going to sort in ascending order. Clicking again is descending. And then I also have the ability to filter on that column as well. So I can create my own filter, or I can filter to the highlighted value that is currently selected. If I wanted to filter on a specific transaction type or GL account name, I can do that just by clicking over here, and then I can build filters. So maybe I wanted to filter by account name, maybe I wanted to filter by amount, maybe I wanted to also filter by cost center. So any of those dimensions that I talked about earlier are also available here within your chart, and you can sort and filter on those as well. So lots of flexibility for getting data filtered and sorted, and then if you wanted to analyze it in Excel, very easy by clicking on the page option to get it out to Excel. One of the other things too that I wanted to talk about was the tight integration that Business Central has with other applications in the Microsoft stack. One of those being Outlook. So if I have my Outlook loaded here and I have an email highlighted, I have myself set up as a contact within one of my vendor companies. And so I have myself set up as a Fabricam contact, which is a vendor of mine in Business Central. So whenever I highlight an email that is from a contact that I have set up in Business Central, this fact box opens up on the right side of the screen, and I can see data about that vendor here on the right side of the screen. Again, I can drill into any of these details to look at further further transactions or display detail that I might want to review. Also here at the top, I have some other icons, which in this case, I can create a new document right within Outlook. So if this is a vendor who is sending me an invoice as an Outlook attachment, I can create a new accounts payable invoice directly within Outlook. I can add the attachment as a supporting document or an attachment to that transaction. And as soon as I begin to create the document, it's created in Business Central. So if I'm an accounts payable person and I get a lot of invoices and I spend a lot of my day within Outlook, I can actually interact with Business Central from within Outlook and never have to go there to create a purchase invoice. I can also create purchase orders and purchase credit memos right from within Outlook that would then be created directly in Business Central. So very convenient there to get data from Outlook into Business Central. Lastly, I wanted to talk about reporting a bit as far as financial statements go. There is integrated financial statement reporting within Business Central, and those are called account schedules. There are several that come along with Business Central as defaults. The ones that you see here with the M's in front of them: balance sheet, cash flow, income statement, retained earnings, and so forth. So what does that mean? That, it comes with Business Central. Microsoft has developed those, if you will, based upon the default chart of accounts, so that if you select one of those and you plan to use it, you may want to actually make a copy of it because, as Brian mentioned, the updates that occur with Business Central, there is a chance that they might also update those default financial statements. But you can make copies of those, you can rename them and use them right out of the box. There is also a feature, if we jump back here to the chart of accounts for just a minute, still talking about account schedules. Within the chart, there is, as we have in GP, the posting type, whether it's income statement or balance sheet. We have account categories, and we also have account subcategories. So within the chart of accounts, when you initially configure it, you would assign an account category just like GP, and then you also have the option of a subcategory. So an example here for my petty cash account might be that I have an asset account, but the subcategory is cash. So what that means within the account schedules is that based upon categories and subcategories that I assign to my chart, if I go and I open a default financial statement, all of that configuration is done for me as far as the rows. So I can automatically generate an account statement based upon my chart of account configuration. So right out of the box, I have reporting capability available to me without having to do a lot of design work. So in addition to those, normal balance sheet income statements where I might have current month and year to date, I can also do a period statement as well. So I may want to look at January through December. I can also configure those account statements to show dimensional reporting. So, the analogy might be, I might have these categories down the left side of the screen, these accounts down the left side of the screen, and across the top, I would have my dimensions that I'm reporting on. So again, lots of flexibility right out of the box. With the migration from GP, as Brian noted, there are some tools that Microsoft provides to get your data from GP to Business Central. Master file data is fairly simple. General ledger account history, again, fairly simple. So obviously, if you decide that you want to take a look at Business Central, we can help you kind of assess what that migration effort would look like from GP. And always we'd be, obviously happy to take a look at what you're doing in GP and show you how that would translate to Business Central. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Glenn Sharp, who's going to show us Intact. And again, appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you, Brian, for giving us a rundown on that. And now I will kind of take us through looking at Sage Intact. And so where I like to begin as we're talking about Sage Intact is actually from their website. And the reason I'm doing that, some people are, if they're new to the cloud, to having things in the cloud, just kind of want to show you Intact makes all of their information that people ask about public to everyone as they're doing that. So from Intact's website, under the company trust area, you have access to all the information about, backups, failovers, system security, all the SOC compliances, all that type of information, their uptime, all that information is available to you. So they don't hide that information, they make it publicly available to show you how secure and how enabled the platform is. And as Brian Campbell mentioned earlier, Intact also offers a quarterly releases. So Intact is in what's called a multi-tenant solution. So that means that everyone who's using Intact is always on the current version. So you're never behind on versions. You don't have to go through upgrades, as was mentioned. But quarterly, they release additional functionality into the system to make it more user-friendly, to just add capabilities to the system. And I'll be talking about a few of those today. So just kind of want to start with that area. I'm going to start here just talking about dashboards. Here we have a dashboard. This is a healthcare kind of specific dashboards just to kind of get us started on that. This information that's shown on dashboards can contain both financial information, as we see, like revenue per provider or total revenue. It also can contain what's called statistical information. So it's like number of providers, and you can use those then to do calculations, okay? Also, of course, you can have financial information, graphs, all those type of things. Now, dashboards are can be configured, customized for each role or for each person who will be using that. Just to show you kind of a different environment, this is a CFO type of dashboard, which has a lot of information on it. The CFO might be looking at, to kind of evaluate their company, evaluate how the system is being used. But we may have another role where as a project manager, as you can see here, may look at different information. A project manager is concerned with their project. So they want to see, are they profitable on their project? So here we have a look at different projects, and you can see what's being billed, revenue, hours worked. All that information is available to them so that they can see that information, also check kind of to their budget for that project, see how they're trending, and all those types of information. Now within Intact as well, as you're looking at this information and have this presentation of a dashboard, you're also able to look and drill down into information. So if I was, a project manager and I wanted to look and see what's making up these other expenses, I can click on that. I can see that this is a bill. It tells me this was a bill. And I can actually open up that bill and see that bill within the system. So I can see that that bill is there. If there's an attachment that's attached to it, it would be saved and stored within that, but I could open the attachment. But I can do that as someone who's not like a full accounting user within Intact. It's just someone who has access and the capabilities to run and to look at dashboards, which is a very low cost type of user within the system. But having this type of access and showing this type of information and also making it relevant to the person is a big indicator of kind of the flexibility and reporting capabilities of Sage Intact. So some of the questions is, how do we get here? As Brian mentioned in the Business Central area, Intact also uses the concept of dimensions. So if I was looking at specific things here across the top, I have some of my different dimensions that I can look at. If, for example, if I am a project manager and I want to look at a specific, project within the system, then I may, look at that project, and all my information then on the screen would change just to show me information, for that specific project that's associated to that. And so it doesn't matter which screens you're on that you're using that for, but you can kind of find that information by using those different dimensions. Okay. And also you're able to have a more natural accounts within Sage Intact as well. I want to bring up an example here that might look familiar to you, especially if you're coming from Great Plains. But if you have, a structure where you have, a location and you have a couple different departments, maybe a couple different projects or some other type of area, kind of the traditional or the older approach to setting those up is a segmented accounts. So if you have one account, equipment account, as you can see right here is your 1500 account. To get all those different combinations, you're up with 75 different GL accounts for that. Whereas Intact has that more modern approach where you just have one equipment account, you don't have separate of them, but then you just literally, as you're entering transactions, you're choosing your different dimensions within the drop-down list of Sage Intact, which helps you then to report off of those either collectively or individually in order to look at information that those are associated to. Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility as you're doing that. And Intact comes with 7 dimensions, as you can see here out of the box, plus additional ones if you have like project accounting or other areas that you may be using as well. Okay. Now I want to go back here to look at our system. I want to talk about what's called multi-entity, which is something that Intact has and makes natively available within the system. So if I'm looking at our environment here, I can see up here that we're looking at the top level of the company. If I'm underneath that, then I can see that this company has other companies underneath it. Okay, so I can easily switch between different companies just by clicking on it, and that will take me into that company specifically. And so you can also, set up the system so some users only have access to certain companies. Okay, so you can limit someone's access. So maybe they just log into certain companies, but from an administrative point of view at the top level, you can see things across the different entities. It is very easy to set up new companies within the system. The only thing you really need to do within the system is set up the entity itself. As you can see right here, this is where all of my entities are set up. To add a new one within the system, I just click on add. The only information that's really required is my ID, name and the federal ID, in this instance, information. And that's going to create a new company for me. Okay, I don't have to go through a whole large process for that. But another thing that we'd want to do within the system is do what's called inter-entity account mapping. That means if you need to automate the do-to-do-froms between your different companies, Intact has a very easy way to do that, and they do that automatically for you. So this example, as you can see, between entity A and entity B, it's showing for each one. This is what's called the advanced model, so it's kind of breaking it down kind of into finite GL accounts to break down what those do-to and do-froms, what accounts are going to hit within the system. So it's helping you do that, okay? The way that that works is if I was to do a journal entry, and I'm here at the top level, if I was to do a journal entry within the system, we'll do one here just very quickly. This is a task inter-entity entry. And I'm just going to take this between 2 different entities. I'm just going to choose a department here. And you can see these are my different dimensions. Now that I have all of these showing here, you may not show all of these whenever you're entering a transaction, but for my account that I will be using here, I'll just use cost of goods sold materials, and we'll just say, and this is also a multi-currency environment, as you can see, so we have different currencies that can be done. You don't have to have it in multi-currency if you do not wish to. And so I'm going between this entity and I'm going to just move this to another entity within the system as well. It's just something that maybe got recorded incorrectly. And you can see that it's going to make the other side of that transaction there for me. Now, only other thing I'd want to do here, since I'm doing an entry between different entities, I'd want to tell the system based off of the mapping that I set up, how to do that mapping. So I'll just choose one of the entities for that, and then I'll select to post that transaction. Whenever I do that, I can go into my journals here, and journals and Intact is just a way to easily find information, and I can view that transaction, as you can see here, and it's going to show me within the system the transaction that I made, and then it's going to show me the inter-entity transaction that the system made for that. So it's doing this part down here, the bottom part, automatically based off of the entity mapping. Now this happens, of course, we're doing journal entries. Also, you can do that. The system will handle that if you have a consolidated accounts payable. So maybe one company is paying for multiple companies within the system. So that's another way that you can use that and use that multi-entity architecture. Another thing I would just like to point out within Intact is how it has workflows kind of enabled for you, and I'll just do that while we're here to speak about that. One actually new feature is we talk about Intact having new releases within the system. So a new thing that came out actually just this last release is called checklist. And so you can see here that I have a checklist that I have created within the system. This is for closing out the month, and so it has different activities within the system. And you can assign these to different individuals that they can keep track of and then mark whenever they have been completed for that. And they will also, when you assign them to something, they will get an email notification that they've been assigned to complete this and the due date of that completion. And so the system will handle that kind of, you can set up different checklists for different things. And so that's called a new checklist feature that they brought into Intact. Another area where we see workflows and things within Intact is also like within our purchasing area. I'm just going to click on the overview here. You can see here for purchasing that there's a workflow between the purchase requisition, purchase order, and it goes to vendor invoice. And when something goes to vendor invoice, that's when it's going over to accounts payable within the system. Okay, so you can customize how this workflow works within the system, and you can also you can use what's called spend management. And spend management will allow you within the system to set up a budget for different departments and different things. And so if someone is entering a purchase order for something, it can actually warn them that they're over budget or under budget. So it also has features available like that as well. A couple other things I just want to point out is some things that Intact has natively within the system is going to be revenue recognition. So if you are in an environment where you need to defer revenue or recognize revenue over time, then you can set that up easily within the system. There's a lot of different revenue recognition capabilities, as you can see here. These are some that's already been created here, but you can recognize revenue based off of maybe just a straight line method with a start date. Maybe you want to spread a revenue that you have for a $12,000 contract and you want to recognize $1,000 each year. That's just a straight line revenue recognition method for that. You can create these as many as you want, and then you use these within the order entry or the sales type of transactions, but you can choose what that revenue recognition method is going to be. There's a lot of different ones. If you're also using project accounting, for example, within Intact, you can say, I want to do it based off of % complete, then it's based off of maybe what's happening on the project, by actual hours used, or even if it's by what's called an observed % complete, where someone goes in and says, it's this percentage complete, and then you would recognize that much revenue at that time. So there's a lot of different methods that you can use for that within Sage Intacct. And you can do the same thing if you're using project accounting for billing. So if you are, maybe you want to bill on a certain schedule that may be different than your revenue recognition schedule, you can set up within the system and say, well, based off of, whenever a task is a certain percentage completed or a project itself is a certain percentage completed, the system will handle that type of billing for you and allow the system to actually bill out that information or the revenue recognition, what have you, using those different types of features that are built within the system automatically. One other thing I just wanted to show very quickly, as Brian showed, is just the ability to do some reporting within Sage Intacct. So Intacct has a similar type of structure in that your chart of accounts can be very simplified within the system. Most of our clients use 4, 5, or 6 digits, but you do not have to have a large chart of accounts since you have that concept of dimensions. And so that allows for those to be set up. And then whenever you're creating financial reports within Sage Intacct, you also use what's called account groups. So account groups within Intacct allow you, if you can think of the rows on your financial report. So if I look at assets here as an example, you can see here, I'm going to make this a little bit larger, that all of my cash accounts are under an account group called cash and cash equivalent. Accounts receivable are under a group as well. Those are grouped together under current assets. And then current assets and fixed assets are grouped together under assets. So what that means is that if you're creating a financial report, you don't have to know all these things down through here. The system will, you just add assets, and you add your liabilities and equity, and you would have a balance sheet. Very similarly, if you had net income, for example, if you were doing that income type of report, all of your revenues would be grouped together, and then all of your expenditures and things like that would be grouped together. So if you're doing a P&L type of report, then it's you just add net income, and all the rows can be added for you automatically. So it makes it very simple to do that. The other thing, of course, is our use of dimensions. So you have the different dimensions that I mentioned that you have available. You can group those together. You can create hierarchies of those groups and report off of different types of dimensions. So it's a lot of different ways that you can look at your financials and be able to use your financials within the system. And just creating those financial reports is a very simple type of process in that once you create those, as I mentioned, create that report, you just select your account group that you want to use for that. Everything will be included that's underneath that, and you just kind of walk down this path. And so you would just add your columns that you need to add for this, whether they be actual or budget or whatever type of information that you're using. You can add computations in columns, you can filter the report, and that's what really some of the power is of using financial reports within Intacct, is that you can filter, you can have it prompt you for the date to run it by, prompt you for the different dimensions that you may be using, so you can really kind of slice and dice your data. What this also allows you to do whenever you are using the system is to easily consolidate information. So if you did have a multi-entity type of structure, you can easily consolidate that information together. If you are in a type of environment that has, you have different currencies, you happen to have different currencies, or if you have domestic currencies, but you have to do a lot of types of eliminations between those, then Intacct has a feature that's called global consolidation. So with global consolidation, what you do is you can set up the system. I'm just going to choose a book here. And whenever you set up the system, you can set up what entities that you want to consolidate for that. Of course, you can assign it to a journal for that. You may have some accounts that you want to override during that consolidation, but then you can also select your elimination accounts. And so the system can automatically do your eliminations for you, maybe between your due from accounts. And so it will create that consolidated type of financials that you need to do if you have eliminations that you want the system to automatically do within the system. There's a lot of capabilities and workflow that's built within Intacct to help you get the information out, to help you provide that information to the end users, and so that they are able to have the dashboards, have the type of information that they need in order to make decisions for their company in real time as their company grows. At this time, Sarah, I'll turn it back, or Brian, I'll turn it back over to you if you need to take any questions.
Wow, thank you, Brian and Glenn, for doing such a great job on a quick summary of both of those great solutions. We really appreciate your time today. Brian, I've turned it back over to you.
Okay, sounds good. I don't know why I can't share my PowerPoint, but we're actually moving into Q&A. So I don't know, Sarah, if I see the questions here. Do you want to?
Yep. Yep. Let me take a look at the questions that we have. So the first question we have here is, how difficult is it to migrate our GP data?
Okay. So yeah, so Real simple. Microsoft provides you tools to do that migration. So taking the information and basically bringing it out to Excel templates that we then, through Business Central tools, import in. Same with Sage Intacct. And Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong. Intacct provides us the tools to allow us to bring that data. If it's exported out to Excel, we can import that data into Sage Intacct easily.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question, sir.
All right. What other programs does Business Central integrate with similar to the Outlook example?
That's a great question. It's a very broad answer to the question. So in reality, with the tools that we have available to us, API integration tools, data import tools, we can really integrate both Sage Intacct and Business Central with just about any other business system. Many of those systems and those applications already have pre-built integrations for both Business Central and Sage Intacct. So it's a broad answer to the question, but the reality is there's really nothing we can't integrate into both Business Central and Sage Intacct.
Okay, and that's a little similar to the next question. Is there a list of the software applications that Sage Intacct or Business Central can interact with?
Yeah,
Yep, go ahead.
So both Sage Intacct has what's called the Sage Intacct Marketplace. And we can certainly share that information out maybe in the chat with the link to that. And Business Central has what's called App Store. So both of those areas are where third-party vendors basically market and promote their solutions that then work with and integrate with Sage Intacct and Business Central. Glenn and Brian, I don't know if you have any more insight into those different solutions for Marketplace and App Stores that you might want to share, but that would be the place where you can go find out what solutions integrate.
I can share the link in the chat for the
Okay.
Marketplace.
Great.
All right, let's see. The next question is, how long does it take to get up and running with Business Central or Sage Intacct?
It's a good question. And that question will vary a little bit. I'm going to ask Glenn and Brian to chime in here in a second, but the biggest factor will be is what portions of the system of, like, for example, Dynamics GP you're using. So if you're using full distribution, manufacturing, financial, that implementation, because again, these are both new implementations, is certainly going to take longer. You know, you might see with full distribution manufacturing, you might see a 6 to 9 month implementation. If we're looking at just the financials for both Sage Intacct and Business Central, maybe 3 to 4 months, depending upon, again, if there's third parties, what solutions we need to integrate to, is there customization available? Glenn and Brian, I don't know if you want to add on to that, if I'm speaking correctly, but
yeah, and I think, you know, it always depends on, first of all, as you said, how complex is the GP implementation that you currently have, and you know, it isn't an upgrade, right? I mean, it's a conversion. It's a new implementation of new software. There are similarities between BC and GP, but you know, there are a lot of differences too. As you know, big one being the chart of accounts. So it depends upon, you know, setup configuration and also how much time do you want to spend testing, you know, the new system. Everybody always has their daily routine and their daily job, you know, plus now I'm going to implement a new system. So I need to be able to put enough emphasis on testing that system to make sure that it's working right. So I think what you said, you know, anywhere from 6 to 9 months, elapsed time is probably a good estimate. You know, obviously that can be longer or shorter just based upon individual considerations.
I would say that's about the same for Sage Intacct as well.
next question.
I think this will be the last question. We're at time here, but do Business Central and Intacct have different payment options?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So Sage Intacct is an annual subscription that you pay up front. So, you know, when we present to you both the solutions, just note that with Intacct, it's going to be an annual one-time payment up front. potentially a multi-year contract. With Business Central, it's a month-to-month. You can actually pay month-to-month credit card. So in both those cases, when your contract terms are up, whether it's monthly or in Sage Intacct annually, that's when you have the option to, get rid of, basically move to something else. But again, you also have the ability to with Sage Intacct, again, remember that updates are done quarterly. With Business Central, you might get monthly, you might get quarterly and annual updates. So again, both solutions have different cadences of when new functionality is added, but you pay for them a little bit differently. Sage Intacct annually, Business Central monthly.
All right. Well, we are at time here. So I want to thank Brian, Glenn, and Brian for presenting today. I know we covered a lot of content today, and if we didn't get to your question, we'll follow up with you individually. But we will send out a link to the recording, and it will also include a survey. So we'd love to get your feedback. But everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope you found this valuable. And if you would like to schedule an assessment, please reach out to us. We'd be glad to take a look at your business and see which option is right for you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.